Good evening, I'm Barkha Dutt and you're with The Mojo Story, our independent digital platform that does a deep dive into the stories that really matter. And today is a story that really matters to me. And I think it matters to millions of women across India. It is a story that has given us hope at a time when many of us thought that there isn't reason to hope. It is a story that speaks to us all. It is a story about holding powerful men to account and a story that reminds women that you will not be punished for your courage. It is the story of Priya Ramani and MJ Akbar. But it is also the story of 20 other women who offered testimonies to support Priya Ramani and spoke about their own experience at his hands. And that smiling face, Priya's smiling face, minutes after that verdict, Akbar losing the defamation case, and that's her lawyer, Rebecca John, those smiles say it all. Because what they bring home is that it is still possible to stand up to the powerful, to stand up to toxic sexual predators and get justice. It is also a judgment that will set a template for what happens in the Me Too movement next, because the judge has recognized a couple of really important things. One is that it doesn't matter if women express their grievances, to quote him, decades later, and that this can be at any forum. And the second is the judge very quietly but powerfully saying that a man of social status, a man of high profile, can indeed be a sexual predator, a sexual harasser. For Priya Ramani and Rebecca John, thank you for giving so many of us hope. It is my pleasure today to welcome both of them to this program, because I just can't remember the last time so many women I know, and some men also, have felt this exultant in a long time. And I want to welcome and start with you, Priya. And that smile now, that smile in those photographs, that sense of vindication, that sense of relief. I can't even begin to feel what you must be feeling right now. Do you want to tell us, do you want to put those feelings to words?
I can't stop smiling. As Becky said, she hasn't seen me smiling like this in 2.5 years that she's known me. And yeah, I mean, it feels amazing to have your truth validated in a court of law. And I feel immense joy and happiness, because this case was not just about me. It was about what women face at the workplace. So it's a victory for all of us. It's a victory for all the women who spoke up alongside me. It's a victory for the women who came to court and spoke. It's a victory for those who spoke during the Me Too movement. It's just overwhelming.
What is the one word you'd use to describe this moment? Overwhelming, yes. Vindicated, yes. But sometimes I wonder whether we've lowered our bar, because we're essentially celebrating Priya Ramani not going to jail instead of Akbar being punished. That's the bloody irony of the moment we're in.
That's true. I was the accused in this case. It felt extremely weird to be signing all those papers where it said Priya Ramani, the accused.
Bizarre.
But it just feels amazing, nevertheless.
Yeah. Of course, it is an amazing moment, and I don't actually want to undermine how important this moment is. But Rebecca, Becky to her friends, you have called this the most important case of your career. Now, you've handled all kinds of cases, and some would seem much tougher than this. What made this in particular such a tough case for you?
It was tough because, sometimes the simplest offenses are very difficult to defend, and people generally look at defamation. And perhaps I've also done that through my career with a degree of contempt. They come and go, it doesn't matter. This was not one of those cases, because this was a woman who was not willing to budge. She was not willing to compromise. There were many opportunities given to us by the court to settle the matter, and Priya would say, "Settle what?" So it was very important, therefore, to contest this case in the way actually that the IPC expects you to contest this case. I don't think Priya understood some of the conversations I had with her early on when she had come to me and discussed her case with me, and when I questioned her and I asked her whether she had corroborative evidence, etc. I don't think she knew where this was going, but it was very, very clear to me that Priya Priya had to use one of the exceptions of Section 499 of the IPC, where it is not defamation if you speak the truth, particularly if that truth is made in public interest and for public good. Sexual harassment at the workplace is a question of public interest and public good. And therefore, no one could argue that she did not have the right to make that disclosure when she made it on the 8th of October 2018. But the thing about why these cases are difficult, Priya had never seen a courtroom before, like many other people. Priya didn't know law, like many others. And
she had you. She had
me, but I was not. It was her story, and it was for her to tell her story. We could only guide her. Sometimes the most articulate writers, Priya writes so beautifully, but it was not a role she was comfortable in, being in court, being the center of attention, going on to the witness stand, testifying, taking the oath, being cross-examined for days on end. This takes its toll, and it took its toll. We had a pitched battle in court, as you yourself saw on some occasions. It was not one of those polite cases to fight. This was aggressive from the beginning. It was sometimes even downright rude, and it wasn't easy. And even the court, I think, it's only as we progressed that they understood the seriousness of our defense. Therefore, that's why I said it was a tough one. It's easier when you're dealing with corporate crimes or other kinds of crimes. You have a witness, you cross-examine, you move forward. Here, I was defending someone who was standing there on principle. I was asking her to use a space she was unfamiliar with and speak her truth. And not just Priya, there were these two other incredible women we had as defense witnesses, Nilofer Venkataraman, who corroborated Priya's story, and the amazing Ghazala Wahab, who was at some point ridiculed in court, but she held her ground with great dignity and grace. And that is why I say it was a difficult case. It was a difficult case because perhaps some people on the other side thought, what is sexual harassment? And what is the big deal about somebody asking you some uncomfortable questions in a hotel room? But it is a big deal. And to convince everyone in that room that it is a big deal, I think that's why I said it was a difficult case, because there needs to be an understanding of what this offense is. Sometimes, unfortunately, courts also don't have that understanding, and you have to educate courts, and you have to place the evidence on record. And it has been a long journey, over 2.5 years. But I think the honesty of our defense shown. I don't think we hid anything. The fact that Priya never disputed the fact that she had written that article, she'd written those tweets. We didn't go behind any kind of, any kind of statutory defenses. We said, yes, it was written by her, but this is the reason she wrote. So I think that's the reason why I said it was a difficult case. It was a difficult journey, but I'm very happy we won today.
Would you, and I'll put that question to Priya as well, but would you, Rebecca, be seeking legal recourse? Or would you advise Priya to say, okay, we won one phase of this battle, now it's time to actually make MJ Akbar account for what he did?
So let Priya answer that, because it's really a question that she should answer.
So I will come to it, but I want to start by asking Priya, what has been the toughest part of this journey? Rebecca said that you're not used to sort of being in that witness box, the center stage, everybody asking you a million questions, being spoken of almost in the third person. It must have been an almost out-of-body experience. What was the toughest phase of this space?
She hated the fact that her surname was mispronounced all the time.
What was it pronounced as?
Ramani. And she would constantly interject from the back, I'm not Ramani, I'm Ramani.
Well, Priya Ramani, what was the toughest part of these months apart from that?
Being on the other side of the story. It was so difficult. I mean, I like to be behind the scenes. I like to be the journalist asking the questions, writing everything. And suddenly, when, like today, I don't have the perfect thing to say, and I'm just not like I like to. I'm horribly inarticulate when it comes to giving like short, punchy,
Quotable
bites.
quotes. You're doing
Yeah,
fine.
that was very
Speak as
difficult
you're
for me
comfortable.
to write a
Yeah.
story. And some journalists were amazing, but there were others who just, I mean, I understand why people get stressed by the media circus now.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, terrifying thing for me was to watch, as Ghazala told her painful story, and to watch lawyers from the other side snigger while she was telling her stories. And also, whenever the words "Me Too" were mentioned in court, to hear that sort of sniggering in the background, that really bothered me, because I mean, most of the lawyers were women, young women, and I couldn't reconcile that with their reactions in court.
Yeah, but you know what? The judgment did come from a male judge, which is also a point to note. So misogyny and feminism can both be brilliantly gender neutral at times.
And there were my supporters have been male and female. I mean, everybody sort of across political lines and across gender has been supportive.
Priya, do you feel beyond the vindication and the sort of, the smile on your face, do you feel the need to close this now, or do you feel more empowered to take this further? And by further, I simply mean that at the moment, Akbar suffers a loss of face. He can still drag you in an appeal through the legal process. We don't know what he's going to do, but there are people, we had a show previously who are saying he should be stripped of his parliamentship. He's misled the court. He's open to legal action. Is that something you have appetite for, or has been at the other, been at the receiving end, being the receiving end of his defamation suit, exhausted that impulse in you?
I'll let his political party decide whether he should continue to be a member of his party or not, and hold any kind of office in his party. As for me, I just was telling my story to the world as part of the Me Too movement. And, it just happened that he decided that I was an easy target, and he filed a defamation suit against me. And that was not something I was willing to back off from. And I won't, even if he does file an appeal, we are more than prepared for that, because we have a really solid case file, solid witnesses, evidence. I got a masterclass in defamation law as Rebecca did her closing almost 2-3 times, as judges were changed. And so I'm prepared to continue this battle if required. But I feel like I've done my bit in terms of telling my story.
Yeah.
And that's what the Me Too movement was about.
Yeah, it was. And Rebecca, do you feel that the judgment actually recognizes that one of the huge debates around Me Too has been, why don't women, two questions. Why don't women speak earlier? Well, women don't speak earlier for a bunch of reasons, in part because sometimes the man is so powerful, sometimes you're young, sometimes you don't understand what's happening, sometimes you think there'll be consequences for your career, and sometimes you think no one will stand with you. There are a whole bunch of reasons. But one question is, why don't women speak earlier? And two, why don't they go to court? The judge did try and address both of these questions today, didn't he?
Yes. And so I'll combine the question you asked to Priya with this question. If you were to read Ghazala Wahab's very powerful testimony, she does say, I have no intentions of prosecuting anyone. This disclosure was not made because I am vindictive or I want to see someone in jail. This disclosure was made to set a historical wrong right, and for other women to look at what we went through, and younger women particularly, and get the courage to fight these battles. So I think you have to, I think sometimes unnecessary pressure is put on women to access the legal system and fight these battles. They are not easy. They are very, very difficult. Priya has come to court from Bangalore, leaving a young child more than 40 or 50 times. How does one do it? How does one do it for 2.5 years. Her whole family has got involved. They have left their work. They have come with her. So these are not easy battles, and I will not thrust this on anyone as a lawyer. In fact, the first question I ask my clients is, do you really want to do this the legal way? Or is there something else you want to do? So I don't think any of these women were particularly interested in prosecuting these men. And that was thrown at us consistently by the other side. Why didn't you file a complaint? Well, we don't want to file a complaint. But the Me Too movement and the Me Too platform gave them an opportunity to voice what had happened to them 20 years ago. And this judge has recognized that, more particularly because Priya did the unusual thing of taking the stand. It's very rare for an accused person to come in her own defense. In fact, as students of law,
do you know how bizarre? I'm sorry to interrupt you. How bizarre it sounds to hear us called the accused.
Yes, so she wasn't accused, and it's very, very rare for, and as students of law, we are told, never put your own client on the stand if he or she is accused of a crime. So I did the unusual, risky thing of putting her on the stand. But the only way she could have made the judge understand her truth was if she came to the stand. He saw her. He heard her evidence. There was pin drop silence in court when she testified. He saw her withstand cross-examination. And in the end, this judge, who was not the judge who had recorded evidence, but who was taken through the entire evidence, said that she was speaking the truth. I have no doubt in my mind that she was speaking the truth. Now, therefore, I don't think people like Priya or others who access the Me Too platform were necessarily looking towards punishment or starting penal prosecution against these men. I think the whole idea was to put out an awareness that these things are happening for decades and we have to correct something which is so grievously wrong.
Yeah, but let me push back just a little bit on that, Rebecca, because what happens now to the Me Too movement in India? Are we saying that the court has set a precedent by recognizing other forums exist? And eventually, if we do seek, what do we seek beyond telling our story? I want to ask both of you that, and I'll start with you, Rebecca. When you said you would not inflict this very arduous legal process on anyone unless they were really ready for it, what do we as women seek beyond being heard and beyond being believed? Or are we saying that that is effectively all that we seek?
It really depends on the woman, and I think that option should be left to the woman. Speaking for myself, I completely empathize with women who say, we don't want to pursue the legal route. After all, now we have alternative routes in the form of the Sexual Harassment Act, where you can complain to the Internal Complaints Committee within an organization, which is not the penal route. And very often, and I see a lot of women accessing that route now with all its faults. I think we should leave that decision to the woman. If you feel that you have the stamina to withstand scrutiny, judicial scrutiny, it's fine. You can do it. And there are women who feel very strongly that men who perpetrated these wrongs must be punished in a court of law. There are other women who feel our stories were heard, our stories were recognized, and as in Priya's case, she was dragged to court. She didn't go after him. She was dragged to court, but she has been vindicated. So I really think it should be, I think that agency must be given to women as well. That autonomy must be given. It's up to you, whatever you are comfortable with. But because I deal with so many women who come to me with their stories and I hear them say, we don't want to go through this process. Yeah. I recognize how difficult this process is. Yeah. And as an officer of the court, I do know it's difficult for us as lawyers sometimes. So imagine the pain inflicted on an individual litigant.
Yeah. Well, in the slew of many congratulatory messages, I think it takes a man to point out, Prabhakar, the unfortunate reality is that there isn't a Rebecca John for every Priya Ramani. And I think that is a point, that many women don't even know where to begin accessing the legal system, where to begin tapping into their networks. We are still relatively women of privilege. There is a Bhavri Devi who gave us the Vishakha guidelines, a Dalit woman gang raped for trying to stop a child marriage, still seeking justice in the courts more than 2 decades later. How can we forget that? But Priya, I want you to take us back to that moment when you write in Vogue about how Akbar harassed you in a hotel room. And he is a union minister at that time. He's a prominent face of this government. He's a very, very powerful man. Do you think it through at that point, or do you do it on an impulse? Do you expect the ramifications to be what they are? Do you think he might be sacked from the cabinet? What was that moment when you wrote that piece? What was going on in your head?
The piece was written in 2017, 1 year before the movement came to India. It was written at the time when the Harvey Weinstein accusations were coming out. Yeah. And the Vogue editor told me, write an open letter to male bosses. And when she said that, and in the context of Harvey Weinstein, I had already had my Harvey Weinstein moment. So I began my piece with my Harvey Weinstein moment. And I never expected to name him. But then 1 year later, when I saw younger women calling out their harassers on my Twitter timeline, I think I told you this earlier, it was just like, just hearing their stories, and like, as you said, I speak from a position of privilege. I have access to a great lawyer. I have a super supportive family who will back me no matter what. I have friends who I've stayed with in Delhi every time I've come. So I had someone to look after my kid when I came here. So I mean, it just felt, I felt responsible. I felt like I had to speak up at that point, because so many women with much less privilege were speaking up, and so many younger, more vulnerable women were speaking up. Yeah, I just felt that I had to speak up.
Now, in your case, sorry, Rebecca, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, Barkha, I just want to also say, I mean, in the context of the fact that, Priya, I was there for Priya, and Priya had this really incredible support system in Delhi. I think this is also a moment for reflection, because as you so correctly say, there are so many cases that are presently happening in different corners of India, rape trials, where the humiliation that the complainant woman suffers in court, despite all the amendments in the law, despite all the great judgments of the Supreme Court, the humiliation that a woman suffers in court, sometimes a kind of questioning that takes place, it is actually pornographic. I'm deeply offended that this is continuously happening in the four corners of our country, perhaps because this was a trial which took place in Delhi and it received so much media attention. It was different. But spare a thought for those women who complain of grievous crimes, go to court, and then are humiliated, are badgered, and it's just so terribly terrifying to think what is happening, and it has not changed. We keep thinking that the 2013 moment came and things have changed. It has not changed. We still have a long, long way before courts, prosecutors, defense counsels are all sensitized as to what you should ask and what you cannot ask. And while I celebrate today with Priya, I will also, I'm familiar with those cases, I will also think of those millions of cases across the country, some of them I am personally involved with, where the woman has suffered untold misery only because she called somebody out. So I think we should recognize that as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think not enough people in our country even know, Rebecca, that if we owe the what we call posh guidelines, the Vishaka guidelines to Bhavri Devi, they emerged from her case. They emerged from the case of a Dalit poor woman trying to stop a child marriage in Rajasthan, whose case went all the way to the Supreme Court, Rebecca, and she has still not got justice.
Absolutely. And Mathura, don't forget Mathura, who started the first amendments in the CRPC, who was convicted by the Supreme Court, who the Supreme Court said that because she did not resist in a police station, her lack of resistance was treated as consent. What a long journey it has been, where four law professors of the Delhi University then wrote that open letter. And then we had the first amendments of the early 80s. So these are women who have, poor, impoverished women who have contributed to what the law is today, and we can only salute them.
Yeah, but I don't want that to be the basis to take away from how tough this has been for you, Priya. And did you feel along the way battered and humiliated in the way that Rebecca is describing the experiences of this? Did you get up some days and say, I can't do this? Did you get up some days and say, what have I done? Why did I take this on? Were there tough days? Were there days that it was tough to get out of bed?
I never said I can't do this and why have I done this? But I did feel exhausted and bogged down and stressed and anxious and weary sometimes. But I never thought even for 1 second, why have I done this? I always thought better me than someone else.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the 20 women, the letter they released, how they said that Akbar presides over a culture of sexual predation. Pallavi Gogoi from the same newsroom you worked in, Suparna Sharma, she was on my program earlier, Ghazala, so many women who need to be counted and recognized today for rallying behind you. Pallavi writing a searing piece in the Washington Post alleging rape against Akbar. It was almost like our fraternity's worst kept secret. And I just want you to speak a little bit about whether people stood with you, did not stand with you beyond your immediate circle of friends. How lonely did this journey feel despite your immediate support system? Suparna was speaking about the fact that a journalist heading the Editors Guild today actually defended Akbar, Ms. Mustafa. So there have been all kinds of, fault lines in this conversation. I'm sure that's impacted you somewhere.
They have, and I at some point I stopped reading anything that was written about my case. I couldn't read, but more than sort of people supporting Mr. Akbar, I think the overwhelming support was for me, and everybody rallied around me. Like as you named them, Pallavi and Tushita, for example, got so angry when Mr. Akbar filed a defamation case against me that they wrote their stories after that. Otherwise, they would have been part of the millions of stories of Indian women or from women that don't
never
come
get
out.
Told.
We would not have known Pallavi's story if Mr. Akbar had not filed a defamation case against me. Yeah. But I mean, the support was overwhelming from the legal team, from my close friends, from strangers, from young women saying, you give me hope. The Me Too movement let me down, but it's so good to see you get justice, and justice is bigger than anything, than you and me, just that kind of sentiment. All my friends' daughters and, like everybody's daughters, like young women on the cusp of going into the workplace, yeah, telling me that they admire me and that I'm their hero. That was like quite overwhelming.
I mean, I don't know if you know how many people have just randomly written into our programs on social media saying they cried today. I mean, the number of people who've just said this verdict made them cry. It was almost like being able to believe in something again. But Rebecca, I do want to ask you, since we're saying the legal route is not for everybody, that agency is that of the woman, right? What do you see as the future of this movement? This movement has been sometimes politicized, sometimes trivialized, sometimes sort of embraced, but it has not been without its share of controversy. Many of the men named in a slew of those comments have been socially rehabilitated since then. Life is back to normal. What would you tell women today? What should we be saying to young women in particular about this movement?
Actually, I think young women today are pretty well, they're very different from at least my time. I'm older than you,
but mine also, or different from mine also.
I see the young women in my office, for example, who will not accept this, and it's very clear that they know how to fight this and they know how to fight back. I think we were trained in another generation. I don't say that
or maybe just to defend ourselves for just a moment, we had really existential battles to fight to prove ourselves. Right. I mean, if I had spoken, share a personal example, if I had spoken about some of my experiences of sexual harassment in real time, I was scared I would not get those assignments again. I was scared that I would be told that you will not be sent into the spaces just too complicated, and I wanted the assignment.
Right. So I practice law, criminal law, which is essentially a male space. And imagine in '88, where I was probably the only woman in Delhi who was practicing criminal law, a pure accident. But I was trying to establish myself. I was trying to get my seniors to treat me seriously. I was trying to get those breakthroughs where they would allow me to argue matters. And these were not, that was my immediate concern. And I think today, my juniors want their matters and they want to be treated with respect. And they will not tolerate any kind of harassment at the workplace. So I think times have changed. It hasn't changed fully. We still see so much of this happening. I really don't think men who have faced accusations and serious accusations should be rehabilitated. I believe that I actually put the blame on the doorstep of the employers, because if you know that somebody has committed a sexual offense in his past or in his earlier posting, and you're still employing him in this fresh assignment, then there's something wrong with you. You should be taken to task. And I think there should be, it's not enough to say we have a zero tolerance policy against sexual harassment and we have this fantastic committee in our office. But how are you employing people? And very often, those men who have been charged with or who have been accused of sexual harassment are not even questioned about their previous cases when they take up new assignments. In fact, when I advise new workplaces, I always say you must have a column where you ask this question. And then you must understand what was the nature of the charge, whether it was frivolous, whether it was more serious, was there an inquiry, how did it end, what did the woman say? Because this is as much about the workplace you are creating as about protecting women and giving them a workspace which is the workplace they would like to be in. So I think there must be, when we talk of sexual harassment at the workplace, there is a serious obligation on employers to do a background check. I mean, you do it on everything else. Why isn't there a column on whether you have faced sexual harassment charges or not? Because it's so rampant. At least you should ask.
And you don't mean that as a legal question. You mean that as a Me Too, no. that allegation could exist.
Today, you fill up a passport form, you're asked whether you've been convicted in an accident case. It's as simple as that. Why don't employers then have a column? What are the nature of offenses for which you have been accused of in the past? Are any of those offenses sexual offenses? And why can't there be a declaration? I'm not saying that every accusation is should be treated as gospel truth. Clearly, there has to be an inquiry, and men are entitled to the same degree of, they are entitled to the same rights as women. And if there has been a false accusation, so be it. But at least make that inquiry. And I find that lacking completely. This, who rehabilitates these men? At the end of the day, they go to other places of work and they get rehabilitated. So if you have a zero tolerance against sexual harassment, which you put up on your websites, then what are you doing hiring these men?
Yeah, well said. Just want to give the last word to you, Priya. I asked Parna the same question, your colleague from the newsroom that Akbar ran. What would you tell the younger version of yourself? And I won't tell you her answer. I'll first hear yours, and then I'll tell you what her answer was. That today, if you were to tell something to that young woman whom Akbar tried to sexually harass and was able to coerce in that moment into silence, what would you tell that young woman, that younger Priya?
Don't be scared of speaking up.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things that Suparna said was that sometimes somebody can be brilliant and they can be terrible at the same time. And what young people, in particular women, go through confusion is that you slot somebody as this brilliant person and you think they're your mentor and you can't bring yourselves to recognize their toxicity. And women in particular go through this. We've all been there with men. So I just if you want to add to that, Priya.
As we said earlier, there were other battles we were fighting then. I was fighting the battle not to be in an arranged marriage. I was fighting the battle to go out and work, Exactly. There were more important battles, or so I thought,
Yeah, I agree. And Rebecca, that's the point I was making, that generational shift is also, let's not be so hard on ourselves. It's just the number of battles women fight every day. Right? It's also that. Sorry, let me just unmute you. Sorry, give me a second.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're absolutely right. The one thing I'd like to say, I mean, the solidarity I saw expressed to Priya in this case by both men and women. There were equal number of men who supported her from her profession, from outside, from my profession, young juniors who followed this case word by word, and then later on when we had virtual hearings, they would log in and listen to the final arguments. It gives me great hope. I think today's young woman is a confident woman. I hope she will not take this kind of predatory behavior. I hope she will call her male boss out. But I think women of today and the younger women of today know how to set the terms of engagement, so to speak, and they know how to take care of themselves. And it is important. This case is important to just remind them that it is possible to do what Priya did today.
Yeah, I was just going to say our understanding of consent has also changed, right? Like I remember being a college student when the Monica Lewinsky Clinton case happened, and it seemed probably Monica also thought that she had assented, and like you read her writings later, and Priya, that was something the judge touched upon, that sometimes women are not able to process what they're going through in that moment. Because they're so young, they're so not exposed. I mean, there's a power dynamic that you almost take as a given.
Of course.
What is the first thing you're going to do today, Priya, after this day ends?
Party with Becky.
You deserve it, both of you. I think you two are not the only ones with goofy smiles on your faces. The number of women today who also.
I will say, of course, that Priya has gotten very, very fond of my office and my team, most of whom are men, young men who were fantastic through this case.
Yes.
So they really, I don't want to take the credit. It was a robust team which worked on this case, and which who believed in Priya's story and who stood by her. So it's a moment for women, but it's also a moment for men. My 23-year-old son was so happy today. So like we tell our daughters, we also tell our sons to celebrate these moments, and that's what makes society more livable.
Well, thank you both of you for fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
It's been nice to actually smile at the end of a program. I mean, I don't remember the last time when I reported something in the news and I closed it with a smile, because it's all been so bleak. Thank you, Priya.
To say one last thing.
Yes.
People asked me, when Priya called me up randomly whether I could take up this case back in the day, and I said, of course I will. But having gone through it, I think it was a privilege to be part of this journey. There's so many things I learned. There are so many things that we learned as a team. So I think while it was Priya's truth and it was Priya who won today, I feel very, very privileged that I was a small part of that journey.
And Priya, I just want to tell you that it feels personal, like this is your battle, but like it's almost like we were all invested in it. Absolutely. So we're going to take a little bit of that celebration for ourselves as well. Yes. Thank you. Have a great evening. You deserve it. And Priya, Rebecca, thank you, and more power to you. And to women, what Priya would tell her younger self, what Priya is telling her adult self, speak up. If you can't speak up immediately and you're scared to tell one other person, I always tell young girls who ask me what they should do, tell somebody, because X number of years later, you may want to tell your story, and there should be somebody who has the record of your life and your truth. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you to our audience for watching. Thanks. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.